Aindrila Mitra, the Editor-in-Chief of Travel+Leisure India and South Asia. Welcome to session 1 of TNL Outreach on Rebound Travel, Tourism Beyond Coronavirus. TNL Outreach is a series of webinars from TNL India and South Asia, which is a licensee brand of Purta Media India in India. And the webinars that will follow starting from today will really aim to debunk and decode myths and trends, respectively, around travel and tourism, keeping, of course, the current context of the virus and the pandemic in mind. TNL India and South Asia is one of the most influential luxury travel and lifestyle publishing titles today. And I'm very, very proud to say this, that in the last 2 years, the brand has increased its digital presence, digital and social media presence by over 300%. Of course, in the last few weeks, we've seen a tremendous spike in terms of our digital content consumption. And we've had various queries from our readers and subscribers in terms of what really the future of travel and tourism, what is the future of travel and tourism, keeping the current situation in mind, which is precisely why we are here with all of you today. Thank you, each one of you, for taking time out to be a part of this session. We all know, of course, that travel, hospitality, and aviation are, of course, the 3 industries that have possibly been the worst affected due to the current pandemic. The World Travel and Tourism Council estimates the crisis to cost the tourism sector alone above $22 billion. The travel sector is estimated to shrink by 25% in 2020. Globally, 25 million jobs in aviation and 100 million in travel and tourism are expected to be at stake. But today, we're not going to talk about that. We all know how adversely affected our industry has been, but at Travel and Leisure, we truly believe that, every cloud has a silver lining, and it is really never too late to start planning for the future. We have Mrs. Sharma join in as well, so all of us are here. Going back to my conversation, one of my favorite travel writers, Peter Hughes, said something which really struck a chord. And he said this, that the big question post-COVID will not be about how our travel industry tries to restore normality, but how society's behavior will have changed. And that's exactly what we will try to decode through our session today on Rebound Travel with industry veterans, thought leaders who have very kindly agreed to be a part of this panel. Unfortunately, Mr. Vivek Agarwal from KPMG could not join us today because he had a last-minute work crisis with the ministry. However, we're going to catch him sometime soon in one of our webinars that we have in the future. Please, attendees, please note that the last 15 minutes of this session is going to be a Q&A. There should be a Q&A chat box on your screen, and you can direct your questions through that chat box. And please mention if there is any specific panelist you'd like to address the question to. We've had some overwhelming response over the last few days. In fact, I have shortlisted a few questions already, but we will be taking on live questions through the session as well. So without, wasting any more time, I'm going to go jump right into the first question for today's panel on Rebound Travel, Tourism Beyond Coronavirus. My first question today is, what are the key things travelers will look for once the travel bans are lifted and people actually start making plans? I'd like to open today's session with Malik Fernando. Malik, you'll have to unmute yourself. Malik is the director of Dilmah Tea and the MD of Resplendent Ceylon, the first Sri Lankan resort brand. Ceylon Tea Trails, Wild Coast Tented Lodge and Cape Weligama are the sole Sri Lankan members of Relay and Chateau. He also spearheaded the Sri Lankan Tourism Alliance to mobilize the private tourism sector to act strategically with one voice under the Love Sri Lanka campaign right after the terror attacks in Sri Lanka last year. In fact, it gives me great pleasure to say that Travel and Leisure was actually the first Indian media title to support the Love Sri Lanka campaign. And we did a collaboration with Travel and Leisure A-list members through an influencer campaign integration that we did. Malik is also on the board of directors with Sri Lankan Airlines. Thank you so much, Malik, for taking time out to be with us today. And the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Aindrila. Flattered by that introduction. Delighted to be with you all, colleagues and friends. My view, obviously, the primary factor now is uncertainty. We're in uncharted territory, so we have to make certain assumptions. I mean, I think if there would be a silver lining, it's just that there is a much needed reset in terms of over-tourism, the direction that we were heading in, and humanity's frailty has been really exposed. So we, at one point, some people may think we're like just like these other species that we're, sending off prematurely from this planet. So I think that we should come out of this with more consideration for nature and for the rest of humanity. So that's possibly an upside. But in terms of specifically what travelers we look for, I think there's a lot of confusion now in terms of airlift, safe travel protocols, returning home protocols, quarantine. Some countries have said you can travel, but if you come back, you're in quarantine. Some countries, Sri Lanka included, potentially on arrival, you may be quarantined if you have certain symptoms. So until all this uncertainty, including how the flights will work, how you'll be treated on return and on arrival, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. But clearly, travelers are in the dream phase. A lot of research is showing that 50 to 60% of travelers are saying that they feel that flying would be safe in the next 6 months. So my view is that people are now planning. There is this concept of revenge tourism where people just want to, get out. They want to spend some money. They want to see the world. There is also sort of a, bucket list experiences will again come back into vogue because people are thinking life is short. When is the next pandemic going to hit? I want to reconnect with my grandparents. It was my father's 90th birthday last week, but I wasn't able to see him because we've been locked down here in Sri Lanka for the last 8 weeks. So I think there is a lot of dreaming that's going on. But in terms of how travel will pick up, initially, I think there will be these bubbles like Australia and New Zealand are looking at it. I hope there might be an India-Sri Lanka bubble because Sri Lanka's handled the crisis reasonably well. We've had less than 10 deaths and about 600 cases. So once India also comes out of lockdown with the fact that people want to fly direct, they don't necessarily want to hub. So direct flights from Sri Lanka to India. So we could also be part of the travel bubble that people are looking at. So I think the first wave of travel will be road trips, rail travel, certainly direct flights. And then people will venture overseas and certainly, within shorter flying times. I think there's also a concern of, travelers as they plan about vulnerability of, certain travel agents or airlines, because we hear about a lot of businesses that are under severe financial stress. So that also is a cause for concern. Many hoteliers, ourselves included, are talking about a 24-hour, notice window for a complete refund because people are concerned about what businesses are stable and what businesses are not. 6 months from now, probably 50% of airlines are going to be out of business, at least tactically, till they restructure. So I think right now we are in the pre-vaccine stage. Post-vaccine is going to be a different story altogether. But in this pre-vaccine stage, I think people are just going to be careful and just make their plans and just watch and see how things develop. So we are right now in the uncertainty phase.
I really like the whole concept of a travel bubble and, how people are looking forward to that. And I'm going to actually address the same question to Mrs. Bhatia now, looking to obviously try and find some answers in terms of when people are booking a hotel, when they are trying to check in, when obviously the travel bans are lifted, what are the kind of things that you feel, the travelers would look for? Before that, a small introduction to Mrs. Bhatia. Mrs. Meena Bhatia is the Vice President and General Manager of Meridien, New Delhi. She's also the convener for Tourism CII, Delhi Council. She's been a hotelier for over 40 years at Meridien. She heads strategic planning, brand management, business development of the hotel, and has been at the heart of transformational change in LM Delhi. Besides, she's the hotel representative for classification of hotels with the Ministry of Tourism. She's also involved with various CSR activities for Save the Child and Women Empowerment with Concern India, AIMA, DMA, and is the executive member of Tourism Council Committee, CII. Mrs. Bhatia, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I want to address the same question that I was talking to Malik about. You know, when it comes to booking, what do you think travelers would look for initially, and how do you think the hospitality industry is going to address that? You'll have to unmute yourself, Mrs. Bhatia.
Yes, sorry, I forgot that I was audible. Okay. Thank you, Aindrila. Thank you for the wonderful introduction again. So I stay very positive on many of the things, and I do know that this is an opportunity for us to reset. I think, you know, we were always complaining about how life was, you know, moving so fast and how technology was changing our lives. So I think the world said, let me take a pause, give you a time to reset yourself, and that's the opportunity we got. So while I think that hospitality, you know, we have generosity, warmth, welcome, smile, these are part of our DNA and nothing can replace this. However, it will have to come with a topping. It'll have to have a topping of safety and security. So we have to we have to remember that we are going to be dealing, actually it's almost like a journey to a new world, because we are going to be dealing with mindsets that are totally changed. This whole calamity has shaken the whole world and literally brought the world down to the track. So, you know, it will take time, and we are dealing with mindsets that are going to be very different from what they were before. Earlier, it was like, you know, so what are people looking for? People are looking now for hospitality, but let me tell you that the assurance of safety is definitely going to be the top priority. And that assurance doesn't come from just saying and changing your adjectives from being luxury, I'm a luxury hotel. Everybody is going to, you know, use different words, but it has to come from a very genuine effort. And I'm absolutely sure that each one of us is putting in that effort right now to make sure that we offer facilities that are safe, secure. The government of India has given us great guidelines. Marriott itself, of which we are a part, has, you know, taken the lead in terms of cleanliness, hygiene, etc. So, in our own interest and in interest of the business and in the interest of tourism, everybody is going to put in that extra effort, and there is no other way now. However, what we have to deal with is the minds of the people, and how I think the biggest difference is going to be in how we communicate this message, how we rebuild the confidence of the people. If you were to ask me today, at the moment, people will be scared to come to hotels. People are scared to eat hotel food, definitely, at the moment. So we have to really work very hard to rebuild that trust of people. We run today a home delivery service. Only people who order are the people who know us, because they know that we would have, you know, worked hard and we aren't messing around with anything. So this kind of trust that we have to build, the different mindset of people, is going to be through our communication, and I think mostly from our real genuine efforts. The efforts have to be very genuine, top of the line, absolutely no chances taken, and a great communication. And the key role to be played here is not you and me, it is going to be our staff. And to deal with that, I think it's very difficult, because today they are all worried, they will all wear their mask and they will all stand at a distance. But to sustain that on the long run and to make sure that it becomes a habit and a practice is going to take time. So, you know, you'll be glad, mostly all of us, all the hotels in the city, we've started training our new standards. Training is going on. They have to really embrace this as a lifestyle change. And that is something that as leaders we have to drive, and we have to make sure, it's very small things. The new luxury norm now today, what is the new term of luxury? People want isolation. To be alone in their room is going to be the biggest thing that they can ask for. So we have to, untrain our people from saying when the guest is there, you must talk to him, you must go and greet him and go welcome him. Now we have to change, we have to train them differently. Greet him from a distance, say good morning from a distance, talk to him on the phone, give him a call to check his, his comfort level and all, but don't go and knock on his door. Don't go shake his hands. So all these things are a matter of practice. So I think it is going to be a combination of both our age-old practices, where we used to always wash our hands, greet from a distance, cover our head, whatever. So all those things have to be embraced. And at the same time, we have to use innovation and technology to bring contactless service, keyless check-in, mobile check-in, contactless menus. Today we are, our hotel is housing a lot of quarantine guests who are the returning passengers from various parts of the world, which the government of India has it's a very big effort that they've made. So we are learning with them, because we have strict protocols to follow, and we are learning with them how to deal with this. So the services, like the menus, are being sent as a link to them on their WhatsApp, and they can just order through that.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you say that, Mrs. Bhatia, because it almost feels like the concept of warmth in hospitality is probably going to see a sea change in what will become the new normal in the coming days. And that's, of course, that's something that the time will tell. But I wanted to address this question also from an aviation perspective, and especially keeping in mind air travelers. And therefore, I'd like to direct this question to Mr. Vinod Kannan. Vinod, thank you so much for being with us today. Vinod, I'd like you to unmute yourself. A brief introduction on Vinod. Vinod Kannan is the CCO of Vistara. He has over 2 decades of experience with the aviation industry. At Vistara, he spearheads a wide portfolio of Vistara's strategic and commercial functions, including pricing, revenue management, network planning, sale and distribution, partnerships and alliances, product development, in-flight services, marketing, branding, and customer experience. Prior to Vistara, Vinod has been with Singapore Airlines and leading various roles. So Vinod, it's a very interesting time also, because there has been a lot of back and forth in terms of when when airlines are going to start taking bookings, when they will actually resume services. I know there's been news reports about Vistara taking bookings from June 1st onwards. But what do you think that travelers will really look for, when they are opting for air travel? Because it's a concern, and it's something that we would like to know, of course, from you, like as an industry insider. What do you predict? What do you think is really going to be top of the mind when people go and book themselves on a flight?
Thanks, Aindrila, for that introduction. It's great to be here. I think I'd like to talk about 3 different aspects in terms of what are the key changes which customers will come to expect. One is flexibility. I think what we have done as well, I think most of the other airline partners, but especially for Vistara, I can talk about that. We've basically gone ahead and extended all bookings we've had for travel up till the 31st of May, right up till the end of the year. So the customers basically don't need to do anything. Their bookings are safe with us. And when they plan to travel, hopefully that's exactly what I think Malik said as well, where we believe that people will start traveling again in 3 to 6 months. It's then that they need to contact us and tell us, look, I want to use my ticket for a different sector or for a different date, whatever it is, we're giving them flexibility. Similarly, we've also retained the tiers for all our loyalty members. Our platinum members remain platinum for the next 3 months or 4 months or so. We've also made sure that corporate customers remain in the same kind of corporate discount tier. So that flexibility, I think, is something customers will look for, not just for those who made bookings, but also going ahead, looking ahead. That's something that all airlines, and including us, are thinking about how to get that done. So that's number one. The second one would be togetherness. So everyone has been in this together. We've all gone through, I would say, an exceptional time. You said 20 years of aviation. It sounds like a lot, but I think in the last, ever since inception of aviation, no one's had such a scenario where effectively no flights have taken off, at least out of India, for the last 45 days. But I think what leaves an indelible mark is what different companies, different brands have done during this period. I think that's important, and how we communicate that. To give an example, we've been fortunate enough to use our aircraft, the 787s, to carry cargo and relief material through the country. So we've operated about 30 flights with about 150 to 160 tons of material. So I think that's something that we thought is our contribution to the country, and I think those kind of efforts should continue and will continue. I think most companies have stepped to the fore. If you look at the healthcare workers, look at the hospitals, I mean, the work that they've done is phenomenal. It's nothing short of amazing. So that's number two. And I think we as humankind or mankind are together in this. And I think that's an important message that everyone will remember. The last point, I think, which was also mentioned by Ms. Bhatia, is technology and digital. So everyone's going to look forward, look for self-service. Even menus are now being sent through WhatsApp messages. Similarly, on our side, and I think many airlines are doing this as well, we are going to promote things like off-airport check-in. So gone are the days when you could walk up to the counter possibly and say, look, I'm flying on this flight. Can you give me my boarding pass? Everything is probably going to be on your mobile because you want to minimize that human interaction. Whether that's good, whether that allows you to be warm, that's a separate issue. But at least in the interim, for the next 3 to 6 months, I think the norm is going to be that people are going to do a lot more things themselves. So I think these are some of the areas that will change. Will our usual way of flying pre-COVID come back? I think it will. It definitely will. It's a matter of time. But I think in this recovery phase, we need to be flexible as businesses to adapt to some of these things.
You know, I will continue the next question with you, Vinod, because it touches upon a very, very important aspect. And that's something that, you know, I think across industries has been on top of everyone's mind, and that is safety. And I think we kind of touched upon it a little bit when Malik was talking about it, and as well as Mrs. Bhatia. Of course, we've seen a lot of reports about, you know, airport security. You know, a lot of airlines are introducing, you know, various parameters to make sure that when you're traveling via air, it is safe. There are questions of SANI tagging, touchless, like you rightly mentioned right now about touchless entry. You have basically biometrics instead of any tangible identification, for instance. But from your perspective, what do you think would be the key safety measures as far as aviation industry and air travel is concerned, and specifically if there is anything that Vistara is doing there? And also, you know, from a generic industry perspective, what would you think would be the key safety measures that the aviation industry would be taking forward?
Right. Aviation, for good or for bad, has always been a very highly regulated business. It's always had a very high focus on safety and health. In fact, there's a saying when I joined the airline business that when someone sneezes in Mexico, the entire aviation business catches a cold. And that's exactly what has happened. So unfortunately, the nature of the world today is that we are very global. We have to adapt and make sure that we are more focused on health and safety than ever before. So to look at some of the measures that we'll be putting in from Vistara's perspective, some examples, we'll be making sure that we clean the interiors of the aircraft, all the areas that customers come into contact with, whether it's the seats, whether it's the seat belts, whether it's the tray tables. So those will be sanitized after every flight. We will be doing deep cleaning after every day of operations once we start. We are also looking at how we can ensure that all our staff, meaning the crew on board, for example, are safe, they're healthy before they start operating, and they are very well equipped and prepared in case there's an emergency on board. It also means that as a customer or as a passenger, when you now set out to fly, you need to ask yourself some questions as well. Am I fit? Am I displaying any symptoms? Do I have a temperature? Do I have my mask? Do I have my sanitizers with me? So all these additional questions will now come into play as well. And we as an airline, and I think the aviation community or the travel community as a whole, will start emphasizing a bit more of this. And at the end of the day, when the customer gets onto the aircraft, the other aspect which is very important as well is that the particulate filters on the aircraft are making the environment very safe, very clean, and it's not exactly a concern from that perspective. Yes, you come into contact with a lot more people. There's going to be more interaction or more crowding, for lack of a better word. But I think as long as we have PPEs or protective equipment, and we are well prepared, and we know exactly what to do and what not to do, uh, we will be perfectly fine. So possibly gone are the days where people used to walk along the aisles of the aircraft just to stretch their legs. That's something that people will think twice about. But as long as these measures are followed, and as long as every customer behaves responsibly, just like we airlines will take on some of that responsibility as well, there's no reason why we can't get back to flying around the world, because the humans innately want freedom and they love to travel.
Yes, I mean, as I always say, that you cannot stop a traveler from traveling. It's inevitably going to happen. I'm going to address this question about safety, which will, as we all know, is going to become top priority, or probably has become top priority in the current situation. I'm going to take this question on to Aman. Aman, thank you so much for being with us. I think I was told that this is your first media interaction during these times. So thank you so very much for being here with us and with Travel and Leisure. For everyone out there, we have quite a few attendees, as I can see. Amanpreet Bajaj is the country manager for Airbnb India. He's responsible for strategy and growth of Airbnb in India since 2015. He's been a successful entrepreneur and brings with him years of rich experience in the digital space. Besides being an entrepreneur, when he had co-founded letsbuy.com, he has also had a tenure with Ernst & Young. He's a thought leader, has been featured as one of the most promising leaders of 40 under 40 leaders by Fortune in 2017 and 18 respectively. I'd like to welcome this avid graphic designer, gadget explorer, and an absolutely passionate traveler. Aman, thank you for your time today. Aman, obviously safety has been, a very, very key focus point now. And I know with you, we've had these conversations as well in the past about how it's a topic that's on everybody's mind. What do you think from an industry perspective, from the hospitality segment? What are the various steps that maybe Airbnb is taking or the hospitality industry is taking as far as ensuring safety of every guest is concerned? Because I think that's something that's going to be a natural demand from every quarter going forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Aindrila. First of all, thanks for a great introduction and very warm words. And it's a pleasure to be here and talking to all of you. I think from a hospitality perspective, for the industry to recover, travelers will need to feel safe and confident that their health is protected. I think that is going to be the single biggest factor that would be at play in everyone's mind. And as people begin to travel again, building trust and confidence on the quality of stay would be the most critical piece. And I think we've heard all the panelists talk about, this particular segment before, but I do believe that, processes and products will now need to be redefined, or new products and new processes will have to be introduced in the whole, the way that we have kind of undertaken hospitality in the past. So whether it's self-service, whether it's, physical distancing, or even new cleanliness protocols, these are very critical not only to safeguard, the health of customers, the guests and the hosts, but also the employees of the travel industry. But I think these will be the fundamental blocks of creating consumer confidence so that, they can build on this foundation and then as travel opens up gradually, move to the recovery of the longer haul trips. I think as all of you have mentioned, we'll see that initially the traveler is more conscious about where to travel, how to travel, and then, so shorter term trips or, nearby road trips is something that are more likely to come up first. But I think from an industry perspective, for us to go back to the old days, it is very important that the early steps that we take as an industry help us build that confidence in the traveler's mind so that, slowly and steadily all the phases then can open up gradually. And I think to reinforce this trust, from an Airbnb perspective, we have kind of always reiterated that trust and safety is one of the critical, pillars for our community. And so we are reinforcing and mandating verification checks. We also announced a very enhanced cleaning initiative last month, which is basically, the first overarching standardized protocol for the home sharing industry, which has protocols and details detailing how to clean rooms, specific areas of a home, what products to use, etc. And all of this has been, created in consultation with leading medical experts globally, from guidelines from various health authorities and government authorities, whether it's the CDC. I think the government of India has also introduced new health guidelines and new safety protocols for the accommodation industry. And I think as responsible corporate citizens, it would be very important that we continue to collaborate within the industry, with these government authorities, with the health authorities, and ensure that the appropriate precautions are taken. And also, we support all COVID response efforts and carry out any appropriate measures that are required. We have introduced this, and we'll make sure that, at a company level, we make sure that the communities are involved, they're educated about these protocols, because, from a two-sided marketplace that Airbnb operates, there are hosts who are also looking for this kind of information. They are eager to welcome guests back, and health and safety is also extremely important for them. So I think this retailoring of product and processes would be one of the significant steps that we'll have to take as an industry to open up, travel again.
That's great. I'm going to jump onto actually the most popular question for today's session, because, this is something that everyone has been asking over the last few weeks. And the question is, what are the key travel trends we can foresee in the near future? I'd like to address this question first to Mrs. Meenakshi Sharma. Thank you, Mrs. Sharma, for joining us today. Mrs. Meenakshi Sharma is the Director General, Ministry of Tourism, and she has previously served as the Additional Director General Tourism and Additional Director General in Comptroller and Auditor General of India. She has served in various capacities in Government of India, in NDMC, Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances. She's also evaluated the reform process of World Health Organization, amongst many other multilateral organizations. Mrs. Sharma, thank you so much for joining us in today's panel. From a government perspective, from a tourism perspective, especially in India, what do you foresee as the key trends, emerging with travel AC, or travel after coronavirus, or after COVID, as we popularly call it? What would you think, what are the trends that one can expect in the near future as far as travel is concerned?
Thank you very much for inviting me here. And I think in this kind of panel, I'll be more interested in listening than talking. However, we have been in the thick of it, tourism, what is going to happen, and a lot of anxiety on whether we are talking of the industry, or we talk of the tourist, or we talk of the government point of view. So there are a lot of challenges which we are facing. At the same time, I think which was mentioned, that travel is innate to all of us. So all of us are going to travel. How, when, with what precaution is the question. So I think this is something which the whole industry, I think the whole world is looking at.
Yeah.
So if you ask me that if I can look into a crystal ball, I would say yes. It would be road trip, it will be the nearby trip, it will be intrastate for interstate later, and then it would be, a little far, and maybe international tourism. The challenge is this, that how do we create the confidence? And I'm very happy that the most of the conversation has happened around that. Nobody is really saying that travel will not happen. Travel will happen soon enough is something which I see the confidence, and not in this panel, because I think I'm having this discussion maybe 4 times a day with various people. So that is a very soothing feeling for us also. And that is why we are also very concerned, along with the industry, that what kind of protocols we are going to bring in place. How are we going to help the state governments to come out certain kind of directions and the authorities so that there is no confusion. Because one thing is about having the protocol, the other thing is how do we regulate, put them in place so that nobody gets bothered. Because this is the scene which nobody has gone through earlier. It should not lead to more and more confusion. Because in any case, there is one sector of the people, tourists, who do not know what to do. We need to bring the industry that they should know what they are going to do. So if when you ask me the trend, I would say the trend is going to be people are going to look at the places which are not crowded. I think that is kind of something which I don't even have to say. It seems so simple. So what are those places? Like looking from India's point of view, little unknown places, and for that we already started a lot of webinars so that to bring people, there is a lot to do. So it's not that you are limited by this thing. There are a lot of road trips. We are going to even encourage things like caravan kind of a travel so that you are in control of the environment. I think the initial figure is going to be, can I control the environment where I'm going? And then we also going to have, like, I'm sure all the industry is working towards it, that there is a safe protocol. There is something which you can say, if I follow. So we are working with a checklist with the industry, and I think it has been mentioned, to say that you self-certify that I am COVID safe, something like that. So those are two important things. And then of course the other thing is that training. I think you mentioned the training is very core. The people who are going to serve, so training of the service provider and training of the tourist. See, it's not only enough to train the service provider. There are going to be some other people who are going to be in the similar area. So how are we going to train them? How the awareness comes? So I think that is what I look. So the trend is going to be adventure spots, homestays, safe hotels, things like that, and less crowded place. So that is what my first reaction.
That's very, very insightful. And I'm actually going to swerve the same question, but from a more maybe outbound travel perspective. We have with us Ritu Sharma today. Ritu, thank you so much for being a part of this panel. And it's lovely to see you as always. Ritu is a veteran in the travel and hospitality industry with over 20 years domain expertise in travel and tourism of Switzerland. She's the Deputy Director of Switzerland Tourism in India and has been spearheading the marketing and B2C communication for the tourism board to generate more awareness about the destination and its tourism products to Indians. Of course, Ritu, with Switzerland, it's already a popular destination among Indians. Thank you to Mr. Yashraj. Thank you to Bollywood. Thank you to Ranveer Singh. It's possibly, one of the first destinations that one thinks about when it comes to outbound or international travel to Europe. Obviously, keeping the current situation in mind, what would you predict the trends when it comes to outbound travel, or travel outside of India? What do you think? What are the likely trends one can foresee as keeping obviously the current context in mind?
Thanks, Aindrila, for the invite and for the kind words. And yes, we're lucky that Switzerland is in a position where people love it. Indians especially love it. And we are sure that this love affair is going to go on. So I agree with Mrs. Sharma and, all the other stalwarts who've been talking about the fact that it's going to be all about safety and security, because no matter how pragmatic you are still wanting to be safe. So the international travel from India, I mean, I cannot predict it, but I don't see it happening for the next 3-4 months at least. Not leisure. People will travel if they have to for business purposes, for family purposes, but for leisure, I don't think so. Also, borders have to open. Europe has to get comfortable with the fact of them traveling within Europe first, then probably they open to more further of countries. So right now, last week, thankfully, Switzerland has opened up quite a bit. Hotels are open, restaurants are open, with a lot of strict do's and don'ts, social distancing, 1/4 people. Our office is open, again, 1/3 people, public transport is open, but with a lot of restrictions. So we will know within the next couple of weeks how it is to open the lockdown. And I think it's the same thing with Europe as well, wherein everybody is looking at opening up the economies. You know, the summer holidays are coming up, even for Europe, so they want to see whether people can travel from one country to the other. So it's all the same. It's going to be closer travel. It is going to be domestic travel. It's probably going to be more on self-drives, or where you can control your environment, and you know, maybe seeing your family, because a lot of people have not been able to see their parents or their kids. So that's going to be the first priority. Once it does settle down, I think it is going to be super important. What is the destination? Um, how safe is it perceived to be? You know, what are the medical facilities available? How did it actually handle the COVID situation? Because almost no country, and including Switzerland, escaped it. So I think the confidence would be, yes, they had a COVID situation, they handled it well. You know, they are a safe, secure country anyway. And like Mr. Sharma said, you know, crowds are going to be controlled, which anyway, I think as a tourism industry, all of us are going to look at this whole thing of overcrowding, over tourism, and it might be a reset which might help all of us, because it was getting a bit extreme. But yes, that's what people are going to look at. Hygiene and safety levels. You know, are they going to be also, until we have the vaccine? I think it's important for people to see that in case I do get it, if I do fall sick when I'm traveling, what are the medical facilities in that country? So that's what I'm looking at from Switzerland.
It's interesting also that you say this, because, you know, during my conversation, of course, with a lot of international players, one thing that they kept focusing on is on winter tourism, for instance. Is that something that you think is going to pick up in, especially as far as outbound travel is concerned? Do you think that's an area, or that could be one of the trends that we could look at when it especially comes to international travel in the months to come?
I think we have a chance for winter tourism. I mean, we've been promoting it anyway for the last few years. We've been seeing good growth from India. It will also give us enough time for people to have a little bit more confidence in traveling on an airplane, you know, for the visa situation to be in control by then, by the orders. Hopefully the borders will be open by then as well. So we are looking at winter for the far off markets. That means Asia, especially the eastern far off markets. We are looking at people starting to travel probably even in September, October, if everything stays the way it is. That's what we're looking at. We are actually focusing on autumn and of course winter. So by winter it will be different. So we are definitely hoping that it will be open, and fortunately for Switzerland, India is a very important market. It becomes even more important. So if we manage to stay in the situation that we are right now and not really go worse, I think we will see some winter travel.
Thank you so much, Ritu. You know, I'm going to bring in Chris Flynn into the conversation right now, and also kind of try and sort of look at the entire trends that we can foresee in travel in the coming months from a macro perspective. For all of you out there, Chris Flynn is the President and CEO of World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage. Chris comes with over 35 years of experience in international tourism, working in a wide range of countries. His knowledge of the industry and requirements needed to identify crucial trends is absolutely marvelous. His expertise is also sought by leading Australian and international universities and education faculties. Chris, you know, from a macro perspective, what do you predict would be the upcoming trends when it comes to travel and tourism, say in the next 3 to 6 months?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the panel. Great to be here amongst such esteemed panelists, and thanks for the introduction. I think, first of all, my opening statement will be this industry is very resilient. We will return to growth, absolutely. But I think we need to be realistic about it. It's not going to be as it was. We are not going to go back to a new normal. It's going to be a new abnormal. And we're going to have to work around those issues. We will see behavioral trends or behavioral change. And of course, what that's going to do, it's going to change the motivation of people, why they want to travel. And this is the opportunity. We need to understand what it is that is going to be driving the people who take the first steps to travel internationally. What is it they're looking for? And I think some of the panelists have already touched on that. There's going to be no desire to be in a crowded environment. There's going to be no desire to be involved in any sort of chaotic scenes, such as a crazy airport environment. So we need to change the way we act and the way the procedures are put in place. And I think for a destination, we also need to look at how we invite our guests to our country. We always see peaks and troughs. We have an opportunity now to have a more equitable spread over a 12-month period. And if we start to do that, and if we take responsibility for this, destinations will soar, because people are going to be looking for credibility in a destination and trust and honesty. I think, though, we may be rushing a little bit in terms of how we think travel is going to return. And if we look back at SARS as an example, which is 2003, and of course SARS was expected to be the next pandemic. SARS only lasted for 2 months. There were less than 800 people who died. Yet, to return to growth took over 12 months from an international perspective. And what we actually learned from SARS is there is a trend on how people will transition into a travel environment again. So quite rightly, what your panelists have been saying is there will be domestic travel and tourism. And this, again, is a terrific opportunity for everybody. Crisis is a great time for making tough decisions. So if you want to change policy, procedures and practices and products, now is the time to do it. And you can test market this with your domestic travelers, the people, your homegrown communities. Following that, people will then start to travel regionally, but they will stay close to home. When you've had such a shock like COVID-19, people are not going to be jumping on a plane and traveling 10 or 12 or 24 hours, because they know if they have to get back soon and get back quickly, they want to do that. They want confidence and trust. So there's going to be a period of time of uncertainty. And during this time, this is when we will start to learn from the various different transitions and policies that we put in place. So there's going to be no quick fix. There will be pent-up, well, people say there'll be pent-up demand. There'll be pent-up aspiration. There'll be pent-up desire to travel. We're also dealing with an economic crisis. There's going to be less money in people's pockets. So we have to factor that into our thinking as well, because travel is going to cost more. Initially, travel will cost more due to a capacity issue. We really have no idea who is going to be surviving this in terms of aviation, in terms of cruising. And to quote the Center of Aviation, the Center of Asia Pacific Aviation, CAPA, they predicted that 90% of airlines would be out of business before the end of May. Bill Gates predicted 10 years ago that there'll be a consolidation of airlines, and that he estimated by 2025, there may only be 12 airlines existing internationally. We don't know. I'm just throwing these things out. What we have to do is we have to be realistic and factor these things into our minds and make sure that we follow the trends, listen and learn every day so that we can change and mold our plans accordingly. But we will return to growth. It'll be a much safer environment. And you know, travel's never had this opportunity before. We can start to correct where we went wrong. Over tourism, all that, you know, excess capacity. So this is a great opportunity for everybody.
You know, it's interesting that you say this, right? Because and you know, it's also a factor that Ritu just spoke about, and she mentioned how, you know, probably leisure travel is going to take a backseat for the time being, and you know, probably people are going to start off with business travel first, because that would, you know, in many ways would one could term it as essential travel. But, of course, there's been a lot of survey, a lot of research. Some people say that it's going to be leisure travel first that's going to start picking up, and then we're going to see a move towards business travel. But that's, again, something that only the future will tell. I'm going to bring in the next question in terms of what really, what percent of travelers will actually be comfortable with leisure travel, because that's a very, very big aspect in terms of the kind of audiences that we as a media title really deal with. So what percent of travelers will be comfortable with leisure travel immediately after the bans are lifted, and what we would typically call as rebound travel? And if one were to kind of even give a rough estimate in terms of the timelines for it to take steam, what would it be like? And I'm going to bring in Vinod back into the conversation, because I think when it comes to travel like this, there would obviously be a substantial amount of air travel involved. Vinod, what's your take on this?
So, as you rightly said, Aindrila, there's been a multitude of surveys. There's been a lot of information on the internet. I'm just going to refer to one of them, which was conducted by IATA, which is the World Aviation Organization. And the results are roughly along the lines of what you said. So when the question was how many people would travel again soon, there were about 10 to 20% who said I will travel immediately. And this is leisure, business, whatever it is. There was another 30 to 40% who said, I will travel in the next 1 to 3 months for whatever purpose. And then almost 70 to 80% said that within the next 6 months, they're going to get back on the planes. Now, of course, there's always some element of survey bias. There's always a sample size effect. There's also a geography effect. The one good thing from this particular survey was that of all the countries, there were about 9 of them which were surveyed, India consistently came up higher than the average. So the Indian customers who were surveyed basically said that I'll get back on the planes, at least on the planes, for whatever purpose it is, faster than what the rest of the world said. And I think to some extent that is understandable. India is a huge country. There's a lot of potential in domestic travel, and I think Chris mentioned this as well. To me personally, if you ask me what is the reason people will travel, it depends a lot on 2 things. One, how easy are we as a community going to make it easy for people to travel? I'm not saying as smooth as before. There will be health, safety considerations, but it should not be overbearing. So that's number one. And second, what's the level of comfort that people have in order to say, look, I've been cooped inside my house for the last 2 months. I need to go and see another part of the world or another part of the country. There is a majority, a growing number of people who say that, look, I've had it bad for 2 months. I'm going to go out and explore. The last point I think which Chris raised as well is very important, which is the economic viability. There are people who have unfortunately lost jobs. There are people who are unfortunately not better off as they were, say, in February. So I think all those plays a role, and airlines for sure is one of those components of your budget, either as an organization or as a family or as an individual, which takes the hit first. And therefore, I would not be in a position to put a number out there. My own gut feel is that by the end of this year, we would get to see at least 50 to 60% of people back on the planes. Remember also that there are a lot of people who are away from their loved ones, at least in India's context. A lot of them want to go back and meet and reunite with their families, for which there will be a spike immediately once flights get to the air. And it will continue. I don't think people are going to stop meeting their loved ones because of anything. This crisis has made people sit up and understand and realize what they have missed in the last so many years of their existence.
I'm going to bring Mrs. Sharma into the conversation right now to just really understand also from her perspective. We've spoken about domestic travel seeing a spike in the months to come, and naturally so, we kind of all expect that to happen. But if you were to put a timeline, or in your from your perspective, how soon do you think leisure travel is going to pick up as far as tourism in India is concerned?
So as everybody has mentioned, there are going to be different trends. The first thing I would say that in my opinion, the business travel may not be the first one to pick up, because people have realized that work from home is quite convenient. So unless it is absolutely necessary, people will not travel for business as much as they used to travel. However, luxury travel is something which people are going to miss. So this is something which is okay. I will not take 4 holidays and maybe one of them luxury. I might only take one, but which is only luxury. Because see, all the things which we are looking at, for example, are something about isolation, about a different experience, is something which luxury travel really offers. So I think if you ask me, luxury travel is not the last to come. It may be actually faster to come, because this is something which can really be ticking all the boxes which we are going to people to look at. Like for example, the isolation, the right protocols, and maybe that feeling of, like if I'm going to take a holiday after 6 months, I really want to do it well. I will, so whether I will do it nearby place or whether I will be able to travel by air is something else. But luxury travel is going to come back. And if you ask me, for example, not as a, Director General Tourism, but as a person, I would say I'll go for the luxury travel first. Why would I go to a business travel first, right? So
it's very interesting that you say that, because we've experiential travel or experience-led travel, for that matter, is something that's been around for a while. It's especially when it comes to luxury travelers, experience-led travel has always been popular. I'm going to throw this question first to Amanpreet. When we speak about experience-led travel, what kind of experiences do you think people will actually be looking for after after this current crisis? I also know, of course, Airbnb has started their virtual online experiences. Travel+Leisure has had the privilege to actually experience 2 of them, and they're unique in their own ways. But to actually go and experience it yourself in person, and the tangibility of it is something that can never be compromised. So when it comes to really experiences, or when people are going out on a holiday which is led by an experience, whether it's gastronomy, whether it's culture, heritage, whatever it might be, what kind of experiences do you predict that people would look for in after once the travel bans are lifted, of course, and people have the choice to move around?
Yeah. So I think I'll come back to the fundamental piece that I think we've also heard in this panel, is that travel is an innate need, and the pursuit of new experiences or of human connection is perennial. I think people will find ways to connect. People will find ways to find those new experiences and immerse in them. And I think what you rightly mentioned is, given that almost 70% of the world was under a lockdown in the last few months. Airbnb introduced what we called as online experiences, was just another way of making sure that human-to-human connection, even though it's virtual or digital, continues to happen. And I think the kind of response that we have seen is very, very encouraging. So India, within the APAC region, is one of the top 3 in terms of the demand that we saw for these experiences, whether it was meditating with a monk in Japan, or attending a concert in Amsterdam, or even many experiences within India as well. However, I think I was just reading a McKinsey report yesterday about how the travel in China is kind of rebounding, and I think that's a country that we should look up to, because it's far ahead in terms of the curve from a crisis perspective. And there were 2 things that were noted there. Is like, once the lockdown is over, people want to spend money on first eating out, and second on travel. And I think they are seeing a big boost towards domestic travel, as one would expect. I think from an experiential perspective, I think people would be drawn to experiences and activities that again involve less exposure to any kind of crowds, at least in the immediate term, and gives them more control of their surroundings and more assurance on some of the hygiene and safety aspects that we talked about. And I think people would choose experiences that bring them closer to the nature. And I think so nearby places, outdoors, adventure-led experiences is something that we are already seeing and interested, even in terms of page views of experiences that are not yet live but will go live in the future. And what's also happened, I think, and I'll just add 2 more points. One is, as people have stayed indoors for a longer period of time, they have now going back and saying, it's given them time to introspect and say, what have I missed? And I think so people are going to go back to, that innate need of those passion points, and come back, and whenever there is an opportunity, go for those. So, ecotourism, health, wellness, some of these are themes that will resonate more in the coming period. I think one more thing that I'll add, and it goes back to the previous question that you talked about travel trends, and what we would also see is a shift in terms of the demographics. Given that the elderly are more, vulnerable right now, given whatever statistics that we have seen globally, I think the younger lot will travel first. And when that happens, you already see that, yes, travel was millennial and Gen Z led, but it's going to be in focus a lot more than ever before. And once that happens, you have to understand how do these people think, and I think a lot of these people have always said that if they are given $100 and we have conducted multiple surveys, they're going to rather spend it on experiences than buying products, right? And so the big push on experiences with this demographic will also push us as industry players to bring those experiences to life. And I think one thing that will be on top of that list is sustainability. A lot of people in millennials, in that domain, millennials and Gen Z, value healthier choices, value ecotourism, value greener pastures to travel to. And I think people will make more informed choices, whether they are spending in luxury travel, whether they're spending in budget travel. They would be more conscious in terms of these factors. And I think that is where community-based travel and others would come into play, whether it's experiences, stays, or any other piece.
I'm going to throw the same question to Malik, because I know, all of Malik's properties, they're very, very experience-led. What do you think, from a market perspective, from an insider perspective, really, as an industry insider, what kind of experiences do you expect to really see steam in the next few months? And what Aman said, a very interesting point that he brought to the fore is that the age group that we will look at travelers going forward is probably also going to see a shift. And that is going to see a shift across both luxury as well as economy travel. What would be your take on it, Malik? Because you deal with this on an everyday basis. All your properties promote experiences in a very big way, whether it's the Ceylon tea trails, whether it's the safari experience, at Yala. What would be your POV on this?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree that, the more senior citizens will be cautious about traveling initially, but in time, you will find as they become more comfortable with air travel protocols, it would tend towards normalcy. But I think, as I said earlier, with people having been bottled up, there's pent up demand to travel. So I think there was anyhow a trend to spend more on experiences rather than on material things. So you find that there's going to be younger demographic. You'll find people are spending a higher proportion of their incomes on bucket list experiences. So resorts like ours with our Relais Chateau, where you might spend between $750 and $1,500, you might find that someone who would normally stay at a much cheaper property would say this is that lifetime type of experience. We heard one of the speakers saying earlier that people will travel less often, the day of getting on Ryanair, EasyJet, going to Amsterdam for the weekend. I think that's going to take a while to come back. But deeper, more meaningful family trips with a higher investment, multi-generational, because you want to be reunited as a complete family. Many families have been separated during this lockdown. Going to isolated, off the beaten track locations, which have automatic physical or social distancing built in. So if you look at the Relais Chateau properties, many, Mrs. Sharma quite correctly said that luxury travel is going to come back fast. I was very impressed with her comments. I wish we had bureaucrats like that in Sri Lanka, I must say. But the point is that the higher end travel will come back faster, particularly if there's going to be social distancing in aircraft. You might find the economy fares may double. So luxury will come back faster. People will spend a higher proportion on these bucket list experiences. And, this innovation that we've seen in 5 or 6 weeks, we wouldn't be having this kind of discussion if not for the crisis, right? I mean, so I think business travel is going to get impacted. in a positive manner by people video conferencing. But you've seen safari lodges in South Africa, even here in Sri Lanka, putting on game drives, not virtual, but real game drives. You've got these experiences. There's a fascinating Airbnb experience called Dogs of Chernobyl. This American chap was adopted the dogs left behind when Chernobyl was shut down, and he charges $20. It's a very esoteric experience, but I think it allows us hoteliers to promote these really unique experiences online before someone travels. So there's going to be a lot more research, which innovation will enable for you to be there, experience that experience, and to say, look, I want to book it. Also, I think people will not hop around as much. They'll stay in one location for longer. They may not stay in one hotel and go here for lunch, go here for dinner, because they want to feel comfortable in that secure location. So it means that we can turn on more services. Also, I think, if there are travel agents, I assume, on this webinar, this is a time for this human connection. Trust is the biggest currency right now because people are very hesitant. They don't know who to believe. Many disbelieve their leaders, So I think the role of travel agents, travel advisors is going to come back strongly against the OTAs to some extent, at least till a vaccine is found, because people want trust. And a travel advisor wants to call a general manager or owner of a property. I get many travel agents calling me saying, I'm going to send so-and-so, I want it to take special care, because you can't verify yourself every link in the chain. But if you know somebody and there's an element of trust, then you're going to get more business that way. So we've seen in the last 2 weeks, a significant increase in bookings, admittedly for December onwards. So people are making firm plans. And I really feel that these isolated, nature-based experiences, simple joys of life, safari experiences, tea plantations, also with multi-generational family travels, there's going to be a stronger educational element of grandparents wanting to teach grandkids, about the life cycle of a leopard, or how tea is made and so on. So I think we're going to go back to basics in a reset, and I think that is going to be beneficial for the luxury sector for sure.
I think it's also a sort of kind of slow travel that we would probably see a comeback of going forward. I'm going to ask the question to Mrs. Bhatia, and it's the same question because I also know that LM Delhi and Mrs. Bhatia herself really promotes a lot of experience-led activities in LM Delhi, for instance. But, those experiences would now look very different, I'm sure, from what it used to be pre-COVID. Tell me what are you expecting in really these experiences, or curated experiences, so to speak, and how different it's going to be from what it used to be BC, which is before COVID, and AC, which is after COVID.
So this whole thing came at a time when actually we were doing so well. India was right there. We were getting our much well-deserved attention, and all the Western eyeballs were on India. Travel to India was very well perceived at the moment. Segments that were doing well: wellness, spiritual tours, religious tours, medical tourism will continue to do well, and I think there is a big demand for that. And as Malik said, yes, definitely, we are also looking at more family travels now. And this is definitely going to happen. So we are also looking at curating experiences around that. In the meanwhile, while this COVID was going on and we were isolated from our customers, we also, have big activities like our cooking classes. We continued them from the chef's home kitchen to our customers, and we continue to do that. So some things like that is something we are working on right now. We are looking at maybe doing some outdoor aerial yoga classes, or things like that, which is more outdoor, because we know that gyms and spas will not be opening up that soon and not be very comfortable for people to go there right now. So maybe looking at some outdoor aerobic classes, or looking at some mostly yoga, but I think there is also a lot of yoga happening now. So we are looking at face yoga, meditation, things like that, to replace the other experiences. We cannot take guests like we used to earlier walking to monuments and all, but we will definitely look at taking smaller groups, photography tours, special interests, etc., which we'll definitely continue, but we'll have to also turn more digital here and perhaps do things, connect with our customers who are not going to travel that often. We know that meetings, conferences will not come back that soon. That was one of our biggest business. We know that fat Indian weddings may have lost its weight by now. So we also know at smaller weddings, we are already getting some inquiries, 50 people wedding, which is what the government will allow closely. We've also worked out norms on how social distancing in the meeting spaces. We've already worked out our layout plans with distance. We also know that restaurants will not be the same. We are preparing at the moment on how restaurants, there are different thoughts on this. People think that how can you run such a big restaurant with just 100 people? But I'm saying that even that 100 is a good number right now because people are not going to come back that soon. So we may as well start from somewhere. And yes, of course, this is all till the time the vaccine is not there and till the time people are not confident of traveling again. I think, we've also been told, for example, we used to turn around our room in 4 hours. It was another guest who was checking in. We are now going to wait for 24 hours, disinfect the room and not let it out for 24 hours. So all these things are going to, they're going to not bring back the volume of business, but I'm saying safe business is better business at the moment. To work within the safe norms is better than to, we don't expect a crowd and we don't want a crowd right now. So that's
safe business is better business is, I think, going to be really the key going forward. We've obviously spoken, Aman touched upon the topic of sustainable travel, what we at Travel and Leisure call as conscious travel. And we've been sort of trying to promote that through various kinds of content integrations that we do. But I think in the last few weeks, especially, we've really seen the impact that this lockdown has had for a change in a positive way as far as the environment is concerned. How do we, as a travel industry, as a travel community, how do we really ensure that this continues? How do we make sustainable travel a way of life? Are there any kind of steps that need to be taken to ensure this? And I'd like to bring Chris back into the conversation to just get his point of view on how does the travel community in general ensure that when we do go back to being close to normal or go back to experiencing the new normal, so to say, we still maintain certain good things that probably this lockdown has taught us?
I think this is going to be driven largely by the traveler and the consumer itself. As you quite rightly say, there's been a benefit of COVID-19, and we've seen around the world, the difference it's made in terms of we have clean canals of Venice and less pollution in various different parts of the world. So from a consumer perspective, they're not going to want to go back to the negative side of this. They're going to be searching and looking for destinations that are actually actively seeking to protect their environments, to promote the uniqueness of their cultures, to actually put in protective measures that are going to do that. And part of that is limiting numbers in certain parts. So people won't be queuing up and visiting museums the same way. So this whole idea of environment is going to take on a whole new meaning. And from a traveler perspective, if a destination promises something in the future, they have to deliver. Because if you don't deliver, as we say, you don't deliver what's on the tin, then people are going to be screaming and telling the world about it. So destinations that invest in protective policies, protective ways of looking at their own environments, protecting their own cultural environments, promoting the uniqueness of that. Not only is it going to serve the community well, it's going to build pride in that community, but also, as I think Malik was saying, or one of the earlier speakers, when you look at millennial travelers, prior to COVID-19, we were expecting over 100 million millennials just from Asia. And the number one thing that they want to do is have a true, authentic cultural or environmental experience. That isn't going to change. So now we can reset the button, and we can look at how we can use travel as being the mechanism to protect the environment and to protect culture and heritage.
Malik, I'm going to bring you back to the conversation. If we could have your video on as well, please, because I wanted you to, of course, say a few words, because I know how important and how close sustainability and a sustainable way of life has been, especially with regards to the workings of Resplendent Ceylon. As a hotelier, as someone from the industry, what are the key things that one needs to maintain, industry-wise, to make sure that sustainable travel really becomes the order of the day going forward?
Right. See, two things. One from, say, the destination management perspective, other from the consumer. What Chris said, I fully agree. It is from consumer. They've seen how nature has come back. They've seen how frail humanity is. And we know no one expected this. The next thing is there's a sense of fear that climate change is the next big threat. So there is a lot more credibility to that now, post-COVID, than there was earlier. All the naysayers now understand that man or woman is not, king of all or queen of all we survey, that we are nothing compared to nature. So I think there is a newfound respect, apart from the impacts of physical distancing. I think consumers will be more sensitive. Also, hard decisions by Sri Lanka, for example, the government has taken a policy decision to be a lot more sustainable, higher yield travelers, focus on numbers, to look at high value added. And so I think this was a trend even before that, from over tourism cities like Barcelona and so on. So I think there is going to be an accelerated effort by those who control the countries and the tourism associations to ensure that they have more of a sustainable strategy. Now, from our point of view, or these boutique properties, Resplendent, Ceylon, we are just going to accelerate everything from leopard research, leopard conservation, slow travel, how to make a good cup of tea. And I think people, having sat at home for 8 weeks and seeing that, look, the world didn't end, that I'm still reasonably happy, I'm connected better. I think this whole slow travel is going to come back. And slow travel naturally means that you're not jumping from place to place and packing in 50 things to do. You're just sitting back on your terrace, looking at the tea pickers or watching the waves come in. And that is inherently sustainable. What is not sustainable is, coming to Sri Lanka and doing 6 destinations in 8 days. That's going to stop. Also because of fears for safety. They'll go to 1 or 2 or 3 places, spend longer there and connect better. And we can use a lot of technology at our disposal now to feature how we do certain activities which are sustainable. You've seen in Africa the increase in poaching as a result of the lack of tourism and these lodges being shut. The lodges don't have income. So there is a direct correlation. And guests can now clearly see where the tourism dollar wisely spent, what good work that it does. So I think this whole wake-up call trend towards slow travel is going to bode very well for sustainable tourists going forward.
The next question that we're going to address, and honestly, I think this is $1 million question, but this is, again, has been one of the most popular queries that we have received over the last few weeks. When will people be comfortable traveling abroad? I'm going to address this question first to Ritu. But naturally, I know, like I said, and that's the reason why I said it's $1 million question, because I think it's the question that everyone is asking right now. When do you think people would really be comfortable or start thinking about, probably doing or booking that leisure travel abroad?
Well, that's the golden question that all of us would love to know. But we did a research recently in Switzerland, and we realized that there are 3 types of travelers: the pragmatics, the procrastinators, and the warriors. The pragmatics are the ones who are like really tired of sitting at home and, being cooped up and who want to get out. And I think we have quite a few of these in India as well, who will say, okay, I can get this here, or I can get it at home, or I can get it if I go to the supermarket. So what the hell? I'm going to travel because I have one life. The procrastinators are the ones who are basically wanting to travel, but are a little bit more worried about, okay, the do's and the don'ts, and okay, should we go now? Should we wait for some time? And then we have the warriors, the ones who are really doing research about how do you even step out of your house and avoid COVID. So our question is going to be, what is the ratio of pragmatics to procrastinators to warriors? So if we have enough pragmatics, then I think travel will start soon enough. First domestic, of course, and internationally as well. As I said, borders need to open. So, countries need to be open to accepting people internationally. A lot of countries have already said they're going to close borders until the end of the year. So I think very measured will be 4 or 5 months. Hopefully, latest by 6 months, we should start seeing international travel again. And I'm hoping there are lots of pragmatics in our country.
Chris, what would be your take on it from a macro perspective?
Again, just give me the question again. Was this
when do you think
what's going to be the key
will
trend?
be comfortable traveling abroad? When do you think there will be cross-border travel again? Because that seems to be a little far-fetched in the current situation that we are right now. But like I keep saying, it's the $1 million question, and as Ritu said, it's the golden question. When do you think traveling abroad is going to be all right?
It comes down to confidence, really. It comes down to people feeling safe, and that has a government implication. So, as we've heard and as we know, some borders are closed to the end of the year. It's been announced in Australia, where I am right now, that the chances of opening up international travel before the end of the year is unlikely. Whether it happens or not, we don't really know. So it comes down to that whole issue of confidence and feel safe. We've used these words before. Trust. If somebody can trust a destination, if they can trust the information that's out there, if they can trust what a government and an industry is doing to ensure those protections, then travel will come back sooner. What will happen if those trust elements are not in place is your recovery is going to take a lot longer. So right now, during this period, during this lag period of where we can't do anything, we can do an awful lot. We can now start to work together as an industry. We can partner. There's an old saying that says, we have to be flexible during crisis and we have to be agile post-crisis. And this is the thing. So now we need to put in place all the key components that's going to allow us to build trust in the consumer mindset. There is going to be behavioral change. There's going to be a change in motivation. So if we can actually tick those boxes, put things in place accordingly, then as people start to travel, that's when we become agile. And that's when we start to change things and mold things to actually encourage more and more people coming back. But there is going to be an element of government position here on the stance that they take. But from an industry perspective, I think what we need is to build trust. And most importantly, we need to have consistency in delivery. People will measure us on our actions. And this is the thing. So the consumer now, to some degree, has the power. We have the opportunity, and we need to meet in the middle somewhere.
I'm going to bring Vinod into the conversation now, obviously with regards to air travel. And, right now we are still debating and we're still contemplating as to when we're going to start domestic travel and how soon that's going to take off. But of course, this is a question in the future. From your perspective, when do you think people would actually be comfortable traveling abroad, or would be ready to again board that 12-hour flight, or maybe starting with a 4-hour flight and then going up to a 12 and an 18-hour flight? How soon do you think this rebound will really take?
I think the other panelists have answered it. It's anybody's guess at the moment. It's a matter of trust. It's a matter of when confidence comes back. But I think one of the good things we hope for Vistara, at least as an Indian carrier, is that we believe, like I think somebody raised as well, there would be a higher preference for direct flights. People may not want to transit via the Middle East or via other hubs in the world. So I think that's an opportunity for Indian carriers and Indian businesses to look at. Similarly, if you look at people flying into India, there's enormous potential as well. I think looking at the way at what India has to offer and the potential of single unique experiences within India, that is again another big opportunity. In terms of timeline, when is this going to happen? I would say 4 to 6 months is what is a comfortable time frame to look at. Again, it's a function of what happens in the next few weeks, in the next month or so. If we find that there's a vaccine or there's a cure or there's anything that is making the whole health aspect a bit more muted, that's obviously going to give it a fillip. But devoid any of these, I would say it would take about 4 to 6 months for long haul travel.
That's great. I'm going to round up this session quickly with one last question. And, we've obviously had very, very key insights into the travel, tourism and aviation industry through today's conversation. But I want to keep, at least 15 minutes aside to just do a quick round of Q&A. There are a lot of reader questions that have come in. I want to end the discussion internally with this question, and this is something that we have all really kind of agreed upon, that domestic travel would obviously see a spike in the immediate future once the lockdowns are lifted. And what are the destinations, but my question really is, what are the destinations that would likely to see tourists in the coming future? A lot of destinations, including Goa, has come up with this new report of how they are going to treat tourism very differently, and they want to go back to tourism of the 60s, etc. I want to open this conversation with Mrs. Sharma first, to just get her point of view on what do you think would be the likely destinations in India that's going to see a tourism spike in the coming months?
We have been doing some webinars in last few days. We actually have done 16 of them, and they have all been led by the industry partners, and we have been amazed about the reactions we have got. Without much of a promotion, we have seen every webinar is being overflowing and the YouTube. And surprising part is this, that they have been very well received, and each state and each private person has come out with something interesting thing. So, initially I would have answered your question saying that Himalayan state, the Northeast, the unknown destination will do well. But the interest which is shown by the people, and when they are ready to take their car and start traveling, is to all the places which are giving them an experience. It is not about which state, it is about what experience and what about isolation. So I think my call would be that in the nearest future, it would be some local travel, maybe 3-4 hours travel to a local place, but looking at a particular product which gives them the same security, a new experience. So I think in India is being so, it has so much to offer in each state, that all the people who want to travel can travel to somewhere within 4 hours, 5 hours travel, enjoy, have a slow travel. They might go travel for 4 hours, stay for 4 days, and then come back. That would be my immediate reaction. This is for the next 3 months, I would like to say. So not a state.
Aman, what do you think? Do you think, what are the specific, if you had to pick up destinations, or if you had to pick up certain places that you feel is going to pick up immediately after, after the lockdown is, of course, relaxed, what would these places likely to be in India?
Yeah, so I think what we are seeing is two things. One is the ability to travel will be dictated by state policies. So, opening up of state borders and all of that would play a big role in how they are phased out. But what we are already seeing on the platform is that interest in places where there are fewer cases reported already, right? So green zones, for example, great news that Goa is a green zone. There are very few cases there. And so when Goa opens up the borders, we're already seeing bookings come up for the next few months. And I think that's a very encouraging sign. Northeast is again one key, direction that we would look at. And I would say the hills of northern India are also seeing a lot of demand. So I do believe that, these factors would play a big role. And the focus will be on experiential travel for sure. As and when it opens up, whether it is, local staycations could also be a big play. We're already seeing same city bookings, outskirts just 20 miles out of the city. People just want to get together with, trusted groups, and then maybe book a farmhouse and stay. So staycations, regional travel, domestic travel, and then hopefully, long haul domestic as well as long haul international travel is something that we foresee.
Mrs. Bhatia, I would like you to kind of, address this question as well, more from the perspective of the fact that, of course, you are in Delhi NCR, you've been with Meridien for the longest time. But when you talk about destinations like Aman just said, and Mrs. Sharma also mentioned, what do you think would be the key destinations that will see a spike in tourism in the coming months? Do you think there would be any metros at all, that would probably see a spike in tourism in the coming weeks?
I think metro, we were looking at more increase in something like a leisure traveler who's, coming with families, traveling with families for business. So I think that is the kind of business that we're looking at. And like Aman said, yes, same city staycations, definitely weekend stays by families within the city or from the NCR or a little beyond the NCR, Chandigarh, Jaipur, and things like that. For Bombay, it could be Mahabaleshwar and other places. So yeah, we are looking at short stays by people coming from driving destinations. We were even putting packages together to take care in case they're traveling with a driver, so look after that kind of an aspect. Make some family packages available, things to do for a family, maybe a exclusive cooking session just for the family, cook your own meal, cook your meal together kind of things. And yeah, we are also working on these lines, and we feel that in the next 3 months this business is there, and we are getting already some inquiries because, like everybody said, people are tired of sitting at home and they want to get out.
Panelists, thank you so much. I'm going to now jump straight into the reader question and answer. We are going to take a few. As I said, we had actually a very, very good response, and we've got a few questions already. I'm also going to I've actually identified a couple of questions that have come in live right now. The first question actually comes from a reader, and the reader's name is not given for some reason. It's come as an anonymous question, but it's addressed to Ritu. Ritu, with international travel being pushed behind by a few months in the best case scenario, and even years in worst case scenario, we hope not. But what will be the present role of tourism promotional bodies, and how does Switzerland Tourism plan to apply it in the Indian market? That's the question that we have received for you.
Thanks to the reader. It's a very interesting question about what are we actually doing right now. It's working from home, but okay, we do have something. So we have a campaign right now called Dream Now, Travel Later. So it's all about, okay, this is not the time to travel. We know you'd love to travel. This is what you can do. So basically, we're showing experiences. We are doing virtual tours. We're showing different destinations which are not so well known in India. We are also doing a lot of celebrity testimonials because a lot of them have traveled to Switzerland and would love to go back again. So that's our role right now, is to keep the person informed, entertained a bit as well about, what is it that Switzerland is waiting for you. The next phase will be the transition phase, when we will go into a little bit more high energy marketing, where it will be all about, our campaign is, why do you need Switzerland? So it is, I need to have a break. I need Switzerland. So that's what we're going to really focus on. We're going to work with the travel trade, because already, like Mrs. Sharma said, there's also a huge interest from the travel trade in things like webinars, e-learning, because they don't have so much to do, but they want to get ready for when it all starts. So we are spending a lot of our time right now training travel agents with all the new products that they can actually sell, because we would also like to have Indians spread out all over Switzerland and not go to only 3 or 4 places. So that's the other thing that we're doing. We are talking to a lot of tour operators to come out with new itineraries. Again, more experiential, more stay at one place sort of itineraries, which everybody thinks is going to be more popular. And besides that, we are talking to our partners back in Switzerland to keep them interested in India. That this as a market is something that you should definitely focus on and come out with new products also in Switzerland. So if people are looking for more vegetarian food, it's not only talk about Indian food, but also talk about vegetarian food. So they're keeping the product ready as well. So that's a job. And of course, once it actually gets into it, we are going to come out with a lot of offers with our tour operator partners, which would get people traveling. So that's the role right now of tourism boards, is to keep the interest up, to see to it that people get actually more ideas during this time when they have more time of what is it that they would like to do when they come to Switzerland. And then, of course, be able to offer them the product that they're looking for. So
yeah, I think it's the perfect time to make that big plan. And we keep saying, and with Travel and Leisure as well, our entire campaign is about dream escapes. You dream escape so that you can actually escape to it later, and really how to make that a reality. Mrs. Bhatia, there's a question for you, and this comes from Ajay Agarwal. How best to gear up the sales and marketing of hotels post-COVID?
Well, the sales and marketing is already on the roll. I mean, they're already working, and they've been working through the lockdown. So yes, definitely. I think the main thing was to keep connected to your customers, to keep keep them informed about what's happening in the hotel, how we were dealing with the COVID. We had a few guests through the period, and we had a team of 100 people. So we kept our customers informed. We have been having meetings with our larger customers. And the sales and marketing, definitely, they need, their role is first to embrace the change that is coming our way and communicate the change and build the confidence of the customers. First, of course, they need to themselves feel that confidence, and then build that confidence in people. That all the protocols that we are that we have been told to adapt, and some beyond that we are going to to set our own standards, are going to be there to take care of their safety. So it's not just things that people can see, it is also the kitchens that we are resetting, for example, right now, because 2 chefs cannot stand next to each other and cook as per the new FSSAI guidelines, and as per what we also believe in. So there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes which customers cannot see. We are also trying to show them virtual sessions of how a room is being disinfected and cleaned for a guest room. So all these things are happening right now, just to build up the confidence, because I know people who have been sitting at home for 2 months. There's a fear of even coming out right now, So in fact, when about 20 days ago, when I called my first salesperson that you need to come to the hotel, we need to do this virtual session, they were, I really have to come to the hotel? Is it safe? So, there is a fear. People who have been sitting at home, it is a little worrisome for them to come out. So as I said, they need to embrace it first, and then they need to build the confidence of people. And we are doing it at the moment through virtual sessions.
There is a question that has come to us, which is addressed to Vinod. Vinod, and the question goes this: in India, how do you see the model of low-fare airlines changing under lower capacity and higher costs due to the various new rules? I think what he means is, of course, with social distancing coming into effect, are we going to get rid of the middle seats? Is it just going to be the aisle seats? Are we going to not have customers booked in the last 3 rows? Those are the kind of questions that have been doing the rounds currently as well. What would be your take on this?
In terms of policy, how are we going to enforce social distancing, not just in the aircraft, but across the entire travel chain? I think there are various views on this. There's been numerous media reports There are some airlines who say that it's not effective. In fact, IATA, the airline body, has come up and said blocking the middle seat just doesn't help, which is probably true as well, because you're in any case not 2 meters away from the person between the aisle and the window. But at the again, fundamentally, airline tickets at least have always been a function of supply and demand. It's a question of how many people want to travel, what would they pay in order to travel, and how is that going to influence the experience that they have on board. So let me talk from a full service carrier perspective. As far as Vistara is concerned, we are not making too many changes in terms of cost cutting for customer facing aspects. Yes, some of the services on board will change. For example, we might not serve a hot meal because we want to reduce the interaction and catering on board the aircraft. We might serve a sandwich, or we may not be serving anything, depending on what the guidelines from the ministry is. But at the end of the day, we are very mindful that the experience on board matters, and that is something that we will not take for granted, and that's something that we will always keep at the forefront. How that's going to affect fares for low-cost carriers, and again speaking purely from an industry observer, yes, there are two levers to determine this. One is, of all the things that we've talked about, customer confidence, so-called rebound in demand, or people who are saying, who are pragmatists, or people who want to say, look, I've done enough staying at home, I'm going to travel. So if there's going to be a surge in demand, then there's obviously going to be some moderation of prices. On the other hand, capacity for the first few weeks is going to be very limited. Not everyone is going to operate the entire network. Now, so I was saying that that it's a interplay of two aspects. One is how much capacity comes in, because not every airline is going to be at 100% in the first few weeks. The other aspect, of course, is how demand comes back. Are there enough pragmatists who are still going to travel, or are there people who are saying, no, I would like to stay at home? So I wouldn't say that automatically prices are going to go up. Neither would I say that they are going to go down to attract new customers, because the same customers are going to travel anyways, regardless of what the price is. So I think it's not going to be easy to say what exactly is going to be that sweet price point. But there will be a situation where every airline will try to make sure that it's economically viable, but at the same time have a network that is functional enough to serve its clients.
Okay, there is a question from Munid Shah, and I think, I think Malik would be the right person to address this question. Malik, he asks, what is going to be the immediate impact on long-haul travel in future of smaller or boutique travel agencies in the short term? I mean, the reason that I ask this question to you is also because, most of your properties are boutique properties. And he's asking that what is going to be the immediate impact on long-haul travel and future of boutique travel, really?
See, Aindrila, we are already getting bookings from as far away as the United States for December and January. So the consumer perception, as we heard earlier, is 3 to 6 months things will come right. The other important aspect is a lot of these draconian measures, if this is going to be the new norm going forward, life probably isn't worth living, right? These are obviously interim steps, pre-vaccine. Now, if you look at the amount of research that is going on belatedly, there is a race against time. So maybe 3 months, maybe 9 months, there will be a vaccine. Now, before vaccine, there are more effective cures. Now, here, for example, there have been various native healing that's been used very effectively. There's been a remdesivir, which has been tested successfully in the US. I think at a certain point, people, even if a vaccine takes a year or two to be deployed and everyone vaccinated, that takes time. Increasingly, there are more effective cures coming. This swamping of the health system may be behind us. So I think people will take direct flights will help. People, I think, will take a calculated risk saying, I'll take all cautions, I'll sanitize. And if the chance of me catching it is 2% and the cures are out there now, doctors are no longer fumbling, I think people are going to be practical and sensible. So clearly the fact that we are getting for Sri Lanka, so many inquiries from China, which we are not processing because we haven't opened up borders, probably not till the 1st of July, but we're having North American, 14, 15, 16 hour flights, and these are hubbing via the Middle East. So I think December onwards, even long haul is going to come back. But the next 3 to 4 months, probably not.
So December is what your prediction would be.
Yeah, I mean, we're all now taking baby steps, and if things go according to plan, I think so, if there isn't a setback.
Okay, I'm going to take a couple of last questions before we round this off. There's a question from Denzel Walter, and this question is addressed to Mrs. Sharma. Mrs. Sharma, he asks, what are the strategies the Indian government is working or planning to attract foreign visitors once the market opens up here?
So as we know that the post-COVID is going to be about experiences, it would be about not going to the crowded places. So the whole conversation which happens for India and most of the traditional tour operators had to be real a shift. There has to be a shift towards the newer destination where we can have the social distancing, and also an experience on a slow travel, like India being a long haul destination from so much of space. Again, other than attracting many trips, we would encourage the traveler to come here with a specific thing in mind. And so we will be exposing a lot of experiences that it's more about enjoying the culture and the craft and the art and the stay than only coming and visiting, very well-known destinations. So the whole promotional strategy is going to be on that, and also to be light-footed, because I think something which is, I don't know whether it can be directly related to the COVID and this thing, but there is also a feeling, I think whatever I'm listening in the whole tourism fraternity, that this is the time to again the reboot and look at more environmental friendly, more community involvement. So the whole strategy is going to be about more sustainable tourism.
There is a question that comes from Avni Singh, and the question is directed towards Chris. Chris, she asks, who do you think South Asian travelers versus European travelers will have a higher risk-taking ability as a mindset, and hence may spearhead the comeback of international travel? So I think what she means is that, do you think it's going to be South Asian travelers versus European travelers? Who's going to really be the first ones to take the jump and say, hey, it's all right to go out there and experience the world?
That's a difficult question to answer. Very difficult. I can't really stick my neck out on that one. But I think it comes down to that process that we were talking about before. In terms of volume, and economies and what have you, I think possibly the Indian market outbound will act faster than Europe. And I think one of the reasons for that is we're dealing with multi countries in Europe, with different governments, different procedures, different levels of COVID incidents. Whereas from one country perspective, India, if the confidence starts to resume, then I believe India will actually turn itself around faster than the Europeans. My own opinion.
That's really good to hear. I'm going to take one last question before we round up the session. I know we are running beyond time, and this question comes from Mark Mendes, and it's for Aman actually. Mark asks, presently, we are witnessing systems and processes implemented in hospitality with regards to sanitation and hygiene. And I think that's something that we already discussed. How is Airbnb specifically ensuring that the same standards are being implemented as the other hotel chains are doing? So I think what he's asking is that, how other international hotel chains are really kind of doing these activities and promoting it in obviously a very, very aggressive manner. What is the plan as far as Airbnb is concerned? And I think you touched upon the subject initially when we started our conversation, but if you want to really go into further details on it.
Sure. I won't take much time, but what we did as Airbnb was we announced enhanced cleaning protocol or a cleanliness initiative. This is a global initiative wherein we have consulted with various experts. In fact, we have taken guidelines from various authorities, including the CDC, and come up with an overarching standardized model on sanitization and cleanliness. This protocol would now get launched globally across multiple countries, and our hosts would be then trained in terms of how to clean their specific rooms, guidelines around what products to use. We've had multiple partnerships across the world with companies like Ecolab, which are world leaders in hospitality, sanitization, etc. And we would then also be bringing this into India with local partners. So there is that entire program is primarily put in place to ensure that our hosts are well informed in terms of what practices to follow, and it also gives confidence to our guests when they're checking into the next homestay that this is safe.
I think, I'm going to sort of round this up now. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Before we close the show today, I wanted to just give a heads up to all the panelists and as well as the attendees who've been very, very patient through the entire session that we've had today, that today we are very, very proud to say that Buddha Media India, which is the licensee, and Travel and Leisure is a licensee brand of Buddha Media India, has launched our fight against COVID-19. We've launched a campaign called Fight with Testing Kits. We'll be donating testing kits to hospitals, and it's an association that we've done with MyLab as well as Malik. So this is everyone's chance, all the attendees who are there with us right now. It would be great if you could please go and visit the Buddha Media page on Instagram, because this is really your chance as well to become a COVID fighter. We will be having our next webinar session, which is going to be the TNL editor's session on the new face of Travel 2.0 that's scheduled for May 20th. More details to come up soon. Thank you so much, panelists, to be a part of the session. It was a pleasure to meet each one of you. I know I've not met a lot of you in person, and I don't know when that's going to happen, but I really do hope that that's going to be soon enough. Thank you so much for giving us this time. It was an absolute honor to have you on session 1 of TNL Outreach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aindrila.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.